Happy Saturday to you. It's a 7 bowl game Saturday. We've got a lot of college football coming up later today. And also, you are afforded an opportunity by YouTube, if you're on your phone, if you're like me, to customize your feed. I need my feed customized because, at least on my phone, although not as far as I can tell on my laptop, maybe it's because I watch fewer videos on my phone. I'm not sure. But whatever I last watched is like all over my feed on the phone. So the other day I was driving back from the store with groceries, and I was like looking on YouTube in town, and there was this autoplay video that my phone suggested. It was about like how you end up getting robbed in Vegas. And it was about like, people come to Vegas, they think prostitution is legal, they hire a prostitute, they get robbed, and this is how it often goes down. I don't know what made me want to watch that video. It just was kind of a prurient title. Etc. So, anyway, I listened to that as I was driving back to the house. Now, since then, my feed is nothing but videos about prostitutes, Johns, pimps, nymphomaniacs, etc. Just because I was curious to see what he said in this one video about Vegas being dangerous doesn't mean that I am interested in watching a bunch of videos about prostitution. Just because I tend to read everything in the feed that's been posted by like Mike Hart, for example, it doesn't mean I want an endless amount of more Mike Hart stuff. Bad is the absence of good. C.S. Joseph is the absence of GWFP. Good analogy. So, one of the essay prompts that I ended up working with Jeffrey on yesterday, he called me back hours later, wanted me to look at another one that he had rewritten exactly as I told him not to do it, because of course, too many cooks in the kitchen. The thing is, when you're writing a college admissions essay, right, you got two approaches basically you can take with it. SI and NI. An SI approach says, let's use this essay to talk about what I've done, my accomplishments, how I engage with the events that happened in my life and generate meaning from them. So essentially, an SI approach says, I'm going to treat this essay like a resume and list my accomplishments, etc. An NI approach to a college admissions essay says, I'm going to look at this essay as an opportunity to demonstrate the power of my intellect and the skill of my writing, In other words, it is not about what you've done before, but about what you're thinking now. So what I informed Jeffrey what I said he should do in every essay is, well, not necessarily every prompt, but any prompt that deserves it, metacritique it. In other words, analyze what they're looking for for response from the prompt, why that prompt is contributing to a bad protocol of admissions, or potentially even a good protocol if it's a good prompt. But you know, instead of when prompted, produce bullshit meow. Instead of producing bullshit meow, produce bullshit meow, and then critique being asked to produce bullshit meow. So, needless to say, I don't have as much influence on this process as Jeffrey's mom does, and Jeffrey's mom's an SI tool user. So she believes it's critically important to put bullshit in everything. There's no possible way to intuitively produce something that's of high quality on its merits. That fundamentally, this has to be about your previous experience. So when they called me again, I repeated myself again. I said, look, if you want to go with this approach with your essay, more power to you. You know, what I'm suggesting is instead of blending in with the bullshit, you stand out. But Jeffrey and his mom have this horrible college counselor in their ear, and they're ignoring what I say. So I got a little irritated last night because it's like, on some level, I'm an artist, right? Not a craftsman. Yes, I can help you craft a polished bit of mediocrity. You know, if you present me with unpolished mediocrity, I could polish it if I wanted to, but I don't want to. You're going to do things in a way that I think is contraindicated by your desired outcome. And the only way we can really know is by our intuition, right? It's like we know nothing about whoever's going to read that essay. And so we don't know what they're looking for. So it makes the most sense to produce something that's inherently of high quality. In other words, that's true, honest, insightful, novel, you know, that doesn't just repeat what everybody else is doing. If and to make the point, always hang a liner on shit too, right? Like, make the point explicitly that, you know, you've gotten a lot of advice from various parties, and that unfortunately this admissions process is such that it seems to be inciting dishonesty from applicants, etc. Say that, and then say, you know, if this offends you in some way, if this simple truth offends you, well, then frankly, you're not qualified to be an educational institution for me because you don't understand what academic and intellectual freedom means. But, you know, I guess that's easy to say from the perspective of somebody who has college long behind him. So I get it. It's before 6 a.m. on Saturday morning. Probably not the best time to live stream if you're looking for a large amount of attendees. But you know, the simple truth of the matter is The only cartoon that's come out yet this morning is Firefighter Daigo Rescuer in Orange. It's not one of my favorites. It's not bad, but it's not excellent. There are some television shows I want to watch this morning that are not cartoons, namely some football games, but they don't start till like 10 in the morning. I ended up getting up earlier than I would have ideally liked to, probably. What type is Emmanuel Kant? I think he's an INTP. Um, he writes like an NTP for sure. It's possible he could be an ENTP, but I think he's an INTP. Hi, Cone Man 3. You just missed Cone Man 1 and 2. They were just here, but they left. So I got a good amount of sleep last night. I woke up feeling pretty rested this morning, unlike yesterday when I woke up feeling pretty tore up. And you know, you are the best, Cone Man. Now, did you know before you came around here? Hey, trouble! That guy is such a dick to his sister. Did you know before you came around here that I talk about cone putters a lot? I even have a song about cone putters. Because we have a lot of cone putters around here because they've been burying the power lines under the road. So they're always putting cones and, doing work and stuff. I have a song about sign holders. Sign holders are cone putters that hold the sign that says either slow or stop. And my observation has been they often indicate a third thing with their hand. So their sign may say slow, but then they go like this, like, hurry up. Like, okay, should I listen to your hand or the sign? You know what cones are actually called, Cone Man? If you're seriously a cone putter, you probably know this. They're called delineators, okay? Because they're not all cones. All those orange things aren't cones. Some of them are those tall, thin ones, those cylinders. Some of them are the kind of signs you unfold with the blinking lights on them. Well, that whole class of thing is known as delineators. I know this because my ex-wife, her dad was a contractor. And he never referred to cones as cones. He referred to them as delineators. Hi, Carlos Paeba. Are you here to learn about delineators? Oh. Are you an actual cone man? Do you put cones for a living? When you came in here for the first time with that name, I assumed you were probably like a sock puppet account that somebody came in that I already knew who made that name because I was talking about cone putters a lot. Although to truly articulate the process of cone putting, it actually begins with flag putting. So before the cone putters come around and put cones around, say, a piece of the road they need to patch or whatever, first they go around and they put a little flag where everything they're gonna put cones eventually is gonna be. So first they were flag putters, then they were cone putters, then they became sign holders. And sign holders are a subset of cone putters, as are flag putters are a subset of cone putters. He just likes cone shaped things too much. Can you really like a cone too much? You know, one of our most delightful cones is an ice cream cone. We also have pine cones. Sean puffy cones. I guess he got accused of all kinds of horrible domestic abuse or something. I don't know if it's a fair. You're an audiophile and they can use cones to isolate equipment. Huh. I don't know if I'd call myself an audiophile, but like I've never really gone and tried to get excellent music listening stuff. Like I don't have flat monitors or anything for making music, but what we have at this house, which really sounds good, is this setup where we've got it came with the house. Of course, we didn't do this. This is too good for us to have done. This bar thing, you can see it there, is a speaker that puts out a lot of sound actually. And then there's a woofer behind these chairs here. Behind me. Like there's a woofer. And it sounds really good. But I never use these speakers unless I'm listening to music. When I'm watching TV, I would just use the TV speakers because these speakers they auto shut off. So that's one reason. And also, I just don't need that much like full scope of audio for watching TV. I'm perfectly happy with it just coming out of the TV. And these like speaker setup that we have here is actually rather expensive. And yeah, occasionally if I'm watching a movie that I want to be more immersed in it, I might turn on those speakers. Up in the attic, there are speakers for surround sound, but I don't need surround sound. It's like only certain films even use surround sound. Mostly you can be just fine using stereo. Surround sound came out quite a while ago. Megalomaniacal, huh? Perhaps you should read my short novel entitled The Megalomaniacs. It's a story about Los Angeles, but it's a Los Angeles in which some scientists have developed an experimental drug that kills almost everybody they inject it into, but that occasionally, for some people, it makes them have superpowers. And it turns out that the thing that it cues on as to whether it kills you or gives you superpowers is whether or not you're a megalomaniac. It only gives superpowers to megalomaniacs. So, you know, I never published it or anything. I just wrote it. It was okay. It was pretty good, actually. Pretty good idea. But my best idea for is for anime. You want to know what's a really good idea? This concept I have for an anime. It's called Isekai OP Enforcement Squad. And basically, it's a like the reincarnation plane, essentially, where the workers there stay in this intermediate ground and they police all the people who've been isekai to magical worlds in case any of them gets too OP to keep the functional economy of the world that they're in, like so they don't have too powerful magic or whatever. Then the enforcement squad has to go and stop them and take away some of their magic or whatever, right? Of course, what happens? Somebody on the enforcement squad during their enforcement activities ends up leveling up too much and becomes too OP themselves and gets a little power hungry, a little megalomaniacal. So, then the rest of the enforcement squad has to win the battle against the one who's become too OP on the reincarnation plane, right? That would be a great isekai. That would be a great anime. I don't know if it would quite qualify as an isekai per se, but it'd be like a meta isekai. You have to book a session these days. Megalomaniacal theoretical physicist. But you know what better suits megalomania than theoretical physics? Applied physics. So I got up this morning. This is not the first morning that I've encountered this when I wake up. The front door is wide open, and we are heating the outside as we sleep. Well, why is this not the first time that you've woken up and the front door is wide open? It's 30 degrees outside. We've got central heating on. How long has the front door been wide open? I don't know, all night maybe? The reason it gets wide open at all is because I replaced the weather stripping at my house where the cats had torn it up. But the weather stripping, I need to cut it back just ever so slightly with a utility knife because it's a little too wide, and so when I close the door, it doesn't latch right away. I have to push it to make sure it's latched. Sometimes, like last night, I guess the last time I came in from out front, I didn't do an adequate job of closing it all the way. And I wake up in the morning, it's fucking wide open. We're lucky we live in a safe neighborhood because I'm kind of hit and miss about keeping track of shit like that. I've also woken up on many occasions so far since we've been here with the garage door wide open. I left open all night long. But there aren't any thieves around here, Except for the outside cold air, which stole God knows how much of our propane heating last night. Talk about a waste. Here's some good general advice. Everybody can benefit from this advice. And the advice is pretty straightforward. When you're pulling your first bong rip of the day, as I just did, keep it small. You got to give your lungs a little bit of a chance to transition from a diet of just regular air during the night when you're sleeping into a diet of a mix of air and smoke. Your lungs wake up a little sleepy too, you know? And you don't want to try to rush them too much into a big bong rip first thing in the morning. You're going to make yourself puke. But I'm not going to be trapped by you watching you eat this morning, Trouble. So, hi, Boba Fett. Of course you're fashionably late. How late you are determines what constitutes as fashionably late. You define fashionably. Whenever you arrive, that's the right amount of lateness. Later or earlier than that results in chronic unfashionability. Okay, I think I'm going to be kind to myself here. And I'm going to, that's right, Boba Fett. Meow meow, inversely proportional, meow meow. Yes, I do have a poop coming on. Yes, I will share that experience with you. But we've got a couple small things coming up before that, including this behind door number 1, this new bong cleaning. I like to clean this part up here because otherwise I get gross tasting bong resin on my lips. There, that's better. Now I need a whiteboard to be super correct. Yeah. That's why I'm stuck here in medium correctness. I'm mid. I've heard this term a couple of times recently, but I hadn't heard it prior to that. Like, you expect people to say they're mediocre or middle of the road. I've never actually heard anybody until Corey said it like a couple weeks ago in an exchange we had. You term mid, and I heard it again just yesterday in some context. I guess that's the new way to say mediocre or midland. Middle of the road. Medium spicy. Okay. The thing is, as I've gotten older, I find I don't even really like medium spicy anymore. I prefer things mild. Mild like the gringo that I am. I used to be a getter of medium paste picante sauce. Not any longer. Now I've just leaned into my old manhood and accepted that I want my food mild. Oh. I want my food mild and my poops spicy. Yes, that's right. It's time to visit what the British call the WC, what I sometimes refer to as the lavatory, but what's probably more commonly termed the bathroom. We say I'm going to the bathroom, but we just seem to think that it's fine to leave unstated what we're going to do while we're in there. Next time someone tells me they're going to the bathroom, I'm going to say, why? Are you going to urinate, defecate, wash your hands, take a bath, take a shower, comb your hair, or what? That poop was a big stinker. I had a little bit of churny stomach yesterday at a couple points. It never amounted to much, but the smell of that poop right there conveys quite clearly that there was definitely some churning going on. It's got that hot smell of death that happens when you've eaten something that hasn't quite sat with you right. Well, I feel a lot better now. Yeah, people say sometimes, that guy's just living in your head rent free. Well, that poop was living in my butt with rent free. Fortunately, it didn't assert squatters' rights, and I was able to evict it from its occupancy of my butt. Go on, evict that poo from in your butt. Boo! Here comes my poo again, coming up my butt like a big poo butt poo. I was pleased to see that my football fan short yesterday got about 3,000 views so far. I think 2,700, something like that. I can usually tell at this point. Yeah, well, you know what? Well, but I think that poo I just had right there was more like Little Man. But you could make the argument it was more like Fat Boy. Right. The idea of spicy food is more pleasing ultimately than reality turns out to be after it's pooping time, you know? Because the thing about spicy food is it actually uh, releases endorphins if you eat spicy food. So you get kind of like a runner's high from eating spicy food. But you get a pooper's low as well. Everything that comes with a high has a hangover, right? So as a consequence, my point is that ultimately the runner's high isn't a good enough high to justify the pooper's low that ensues. Now, this morning, not exactly by design, but I guess it was sort of, I was tacitly aware, or I had some sense that this might be the case this morning. So, the last couple of days, I just took 30 milligrams, but today I'm going to take 45 milligrams. With the notion that maybe, just maybe, I will take 15 tomorrow instead of 30. But that additionally, that I might still take 30 tomorrow, knowing that I've got like a few extra 15 for the month if I want to have a sleepy week, which is a 7 days without. The problem I've been having is that my sleepy weeks have been turning into sleepy 3 weeks. Okay. And that's just too much time to go. For me. Yes, I massage my prostate periodically. I found that in a certain position in the shower, I can actually reach it with my finger. You just got to push on that fucker. Push on it like you're trying to work a knot out of your shoulder or something. And yeah, it makes a notable difference. You got to do it every few weeks or so. I don't have my glasses with me. Anyway, I've got a variety of things I could or should do this morning. I'm not entirely sure which, if any of them, I'm going to do. But significantly, I think last night may have been the fourth night in a row that I didn't take half a Klonopin, or it may have been the third night in a row. Regardless, last night as I got into bed and was trying to go to sleep, I was feeling a fair amount of anxiety over long-term things, long-term future things. And I get that a certain amount of worrying about long-term future is prerequisite to dealing with it successfully, but I did wonder some if perhaps some of that anxiety could be linked to Klonopin leaving my system, because that stuff's got a 72-hour half-life, so it's like I still have it in my system, you know. And so I feel pretty good about the fact that I'm kicking that stuff. It's not like I ever got super into it or anything. You know, I rarely took it back-to-back days, but it got like it has some link to depression. It made me depressed the next day, sometimes at least. But I also think that over time, it may elevate your level of anxiety as your norm, you know? So I'm not a hugely anxious person normally. Perhaps I should be more anxious in some sense, but I think when you, not all the time, not consistently, but steadily take Klonopin for a couple of years, like I have, which is like every couple of days, every other day sometimes, I'll say, Rachel, let me have half Klonopin, please. She'll say, okay. Well, that means basically I haven't had the shit out of my system entirely for like years. So I want to get it completely cleared from my system and see if I notice a difference. Seek societal change. Can you? I'm gonna have to wait till I get inside. I can't read that right now. My eyes are too old and my phone is too small. Alright, so let's go inside and we'll see what the indoors portion of the world has to offer. I do suspect that the warning on my channel had some kind of dampening effect. I'm not sure what exactly because it's kind of impossible to determine that. But anyway, things seem to be moving a little bit more last week or so. I think that INFJ and IDOMs, INFP are FIDOMs. That's a bold statement. Can you relate to this, Eric? INFP functions focus highly on self. Well, it's not so much that their functions focus highly on self as it is that their absolute values are subjective epistemology functions. INFP's absolute values are FI and SI. Both of those are subjective or, about the self. So having those as absolute values explains why INFPs are so in tune with their subjectivities. INFJs, on the other hand, have as absolute values the N's and the T's. So, and the experiential TE is their polar. So INFJs naturally are the opposite kind of experts. They're experts about the world and retards about themselves, really. Like, I personally, I think regarding subjectivities, INFJs are the most retarded type. They have super unconscious SI. So it's like when you ask them how their body feels, they try to look to some externality to determine how their body feels, which is really strange. And they countervalue their own feelings. So, you know, INFPs and INFJs are really exact opposites because INFPs instrumental N's and T's are reluctant to do what? Let's see if there's something before that gives me some clarification on this. INFP fiction seeking individual change, whereas INFJ writing seeks societal change. I don't know if the two writings seek anything of the sort. I would say it's more accurate to say that INFP writing is more likely to focus on character development, and INFJ writing is likely to resonate with universal archetypes. Like I believe Harry Potter was written by an INFJ, and it it's so universalist, It's so archetypal. Um, it seems unnatural to medicate in that way with suppositories. It's called boofing, and a lot of pills can be boofed successfully. It's just that there's not a lot of there aren't a lot of drugs that it really is beneficial to boof because like Adderall, for example, you could boof it and that's better than swallowing it. But you can also dissolve it sublingually and it's 100% bioavailable. So there's not really ever any reason for anybody to like snort Adderall. You might as well just melt it in your mouth. It takes slightly longer than snorting it, but um, No, you cannot take medical marijuana that way. You cannot boof marijuana. Marijuana actually needs heat to be activated. So even when you make why would you boof acid? This is another thing. It works just as well on your tongue as on your butthole. And not warm enough. People rail lines of Adderall after extreme boredom. Or to prevent extreme boredom. It's preventative more than it is. This is not a rescue inhaler, okay? Could you, in theory, put a cookie up your butt? Yes. You could probably boof edibles, and that would probably work. But you couldn't just boof a piece of marijuana. Like, I look like your alcoholic father. Well, I am a recovering alcoholic. In fact, we are getting very close. I normally don't even pay much attention to my quote unquote sober birthday, which is December 26th. But this December 26th, I'm paying a little bit more attention to it because on this December 26th, I will have achieved 10 years. And I will tell you something. They told me I couldn't do it. They said in Alcoholics Anonymous, there is not any way for you to quit drinking if you keep doing drugs. There's no way it's going to last. You know what? Fuck off. That's what I had to say to you guys back at Alcoholics Anonymous who said that. There's a guy on YouTube called Boxer Mendoza, and he used to be a gang member in San Francisco. He said one time he stole one of the big city buses there and just flew through the city destroying shit with it. I think you can. Yeah. I have never attempted it. I never tried to boof an edible. Right. Well, they even have a term for my approach. It's called California sober. I'm California sober, which basically just means you don't drink, but you still smoke weed. Your father gave up quitting drinking? Well, what I would say about that is it's never too late. I didn't quit till I was 42. Alcohol is a hell of a drug, you know. It'll tear you up. Just like the man eater in the song Man Eater will chew you up, according to Daryl Hall. John Oates. Schizophrenic mathematician. Well, it certainly does elicit a variety of sort of narrative archetypes of the struggling genius, and the various linkages between genius and mental health. Some people find the channel randomly have no idea there's an MBTI theme. I'm not sure there really is an MBTI theme, but same as Taylor's channel, it has, or that element, or had that element. Yeah, well, to the extent that this channel is primarily anything, I guess you'd say, you'd point to typology because it serves as a framework for a lot of other things here, but not everything. Certainly it's not, I'm not fixated on that topic. I could not possibly stay focused like that on a single topic all the time. Christmas is on Monday. Do Rachel and I have plans for Monday? No. I think we're both kind of Christmased out, frankly. I heard Rachel talking on the phone with either her mom or her dad yesterday, and because she talked to both of them yesterday. Here's how you know Rachel decided to take one of her 15 milligrams. She calls her parents. When Rachel takes Adderall, that's when she calls her relatives and stuff, talks to them. Oh, is he dead now? I'm sorry to hear that. I've got an IQ of 107, Jeff Artisan, which is probably why I'm so mentally well. Taylor has arranged a great setup for his channel, and I really think that it's perfect for ESTP, right? Oh, his IQ decreased, I see. Well, um, no, what I was about to say, Mofed, I think it's perfect for an ESTP because ESTPs want a lot of impact, but ENTPs want to do a lot of ideation. So I get frustrated on the couple of occasions that I went to Taylor's group. I've been there a couple of times. I have, but I get frustrated because I have to lay back, let other people talk, and people are saying rudimentary things. I don't want to do that. I've done that in the past here too, right? I've had plenty of group video conferences. I've got the Raw channel and Raw channel 2. The Raw channel's gone now, but both of them are nothing but group conversations and etc. You find ESTPs are often bullies with low ethics. I don't think that's really fair to ESTPs. Oh yeah, I'm 100% sure, Jeff Artisan. I'm 107. So, just goes to show you, I guess, that people's guesstimates can be perhaps a dozen or more points off. Well, I mean, you can't equivocate just any word, right? A word's got to have multiple usages to be equivocatable. Deft really doesn't. You can play a different game, which is I heard you wrong. Who are Def, Bart, and Jan? You know, my point, Deft Artisan, has often been in the past and will remain for the foreseeable future that IQ is not a good measurement of anything. Because it unnecessarily mushes together multiple kinds of attentional strength and calls it arbitrarily a composite thing of intelligence, you know? It's intelligence tests, therefore, going to necessarily reward people who are very good at certain kinds of reasoning over people who are truly genius at a single kind of reasoning. And the problem there is that I believe IQ tests are essentially ways that TE intuitives, especially, make themselves feel good about themselves or something. It's like it is the case that there are plenty of corporeal matters that are very measurable. Things like strength, height, weight, um, lung capacity. But that doesn't mean that we need to force fit attributes of identity into quantifiable measurements, you know? And that's exactly what IQ is trying to do. It's trying to force fit some attribute of identity that as observers we can observe others having. Well, show media, wonder points do matter. Who knows? Who knows how the fuck they determined that that's how you should measure gross domestic product is the sum of all economic exchanges. I mean, I guess as long as it's defined clearly like that, then you know exactly what it means. But I think people think it means something other than it means because the words they use, gross domestic product, it it doesn't sound like it should be measured like that, right? It sounds like you should be measuring the total amount of production, but that's totally not what it measures. But that's an excellent example, an excellent corollary there, whoever said that. GDP is very much like IQ in its silliness, maybe, but GDP is much more meaningful measurement than IQ because GDP defines exactly what it measures. Like it's any complaint you might have about it is, well, that's a silly name for that measurement. Not that measurement doesn't mean anything. It is a silly name for it, though. You should just call it like total combined economic exchanges or something like that. You know, because that's what it is. So that's what you should call it, probably. Well, whatever. I'm not the name, please. I should be the named police, but I'm not the named police. What is the proper way to define a word? Operationally. We define things for a reason, right? So with gross domestic product, it's so operationally defined that it's almost like a variable defined by a specific number. So you can't really have any complaints about it. In other words, it exactly exchanges the exchange rate between the definition and the term are always exactly 1-to-1. There's no interpretive room there, right? With IQ, it's like, because it's a composite of different things, its definition is the opposite of operationalized. It says, here's a general thing that we're not really defining, but we're giving it a very specific score. So it's like, that Hergadella got 125 on the metric of blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. That guy got 125 on the metric of blah, blah, blah. So, is that good or bad? It's well above average. Oh. And what's wrong with that? Oh. Well, we're not going to really define that. So that's the opposite of operationally defining things. It refers to what we all intuitively understand as intelligence. Well, we don't all intuitively understand the same thing as intelligence. Okay, well, but it's a compilation of, smart stuff. That's not a definition, you worthless fucks. When you define a word operationally in its fully realized sense, you say, we are speaking right now to do the following thing with language. And I'm using this term to draw the following distinction. I'm drawing this distinction on these criteria. You can use the term on these criteria to draw the same distinction among comparable objects, word objects. The thing is, at the same time, I don't want to be entirely mushy about the subject of intelligence as per some multiple intelligences thing that says, like, oh, well, being good at sports is a kind of intelligence, and being good at looking at yourself in the mirror is a kind of intelligence, and everything's a kind of intelligence. Instead of talking really about intelligence at all, we can talk about things that are much more meaningful terms, like solvency, or novelty, deliberation, thoroughness in parsing, etc. Well, of course, there's no absolute truth about how we should define words because, um, in any instance, I might say, okay, I'm going to use the term token here to refer to something. Like, this is a token representing meow, right? But I'm going to use it in a different way. I'm going to define it as in this explanation that I'm making. A token just represents a tag or a mantle that establishes a qualifying quality about a given term or object on the flow. So the thing is, a lot of times people don't use language in ways that require any definitions, right? The only kinds of language action that require definitions are explanations and or advocacies. Negations, things like that. Most of the time, most people aren't using language in that way. Most of the time, people are using language to say things like, oh my God, that movie was so good. Or, can I please get a Big Mac and a large Coke? Or shit like that, right? Or they're recounting particular shit. So then I went to Home Depot and they didn't have it either. And so I don't know. None of those things require any definitions. We're just using words as we intuitively understand them because we're not trying to convey anything cerebral. But unfortunately, because we can treat words as things we just holistically know intuitively about, rather than as things that we use as to parse shit out, What are the best functions of making operationalized definitions? NETI. Questions that seem at once profound and elusive. The key step in Anselm's ontological proof for the existence of God is the definition of God. Well, of course, this is why, one of the many reasons why I say conversations about the existence of God are silly, pointless, misguided, and doing it wrong, right? Since when do we have arguments about the existentiality of something? Like, we may dispute various statements for various reasons, but if we're debating about whether something exists, we're debating way outside the city walls, right? It's like you're trying to conquer a city when you're using language in adversarial rhetoric form, If you're still arguing about whether God exists, then you're so far outside of any city you might want to conquer, which is stuff like because God exists, meow meow, or because God doesn't exist, meow meow meow. If you've been battling for years that far outside the city, then you seem to have it's like World War I logic as far as war goes, right? Well, it doesn't matter how many men we lose or whatever, and how pointless this is. We'll just keep doing it. So on one level, there's that point, but secondarily, no, I would maybe I don't know. I haven't read them. I did read A Brief History of Time. I did read that book, and I didn't find it particularly insightful, frankly. So the other thing about God arguments, of course, is that the problem with all of them is they ignore the central definition of God, which is that which you have faith in, and the definition of faith, which is belief in the absence of evidence or in the face of contrary evidence. So it's like to believe in God is to acknowledge that it's a leap of faith. The idea that there are Christians out there who try to argue that belief in God is argumentationally is something that you have because it's argumentationally supported is is completely runs afoul of the very definition of God, right? So additionally, atheists who think that because you can argue against God or that you can't basically because the position of atheists is one that says you failed to meet the burden to affirm, therefore we should negate. That's all atheism is. But there is no burden to affirm a behavior, right? It's a category error that both atheists and Christians make when having these arguments. Yes, there is a burden to affirm affirmations, which is to say changes in the status quo. But you could also say things that purport to be explanations. So if you're going to critique Christianity as an explanation, well, that's fine. You know, this should not be acceptable as an explanation for how the world came about. That God created in 7 days, Garden of Eden, all that stuff. That we should not accept that as an explanation for things. Of course we shouldn't accept that as an explanation for things. It's not an explanation. It's just a story, right? That doesn't explain anything. So that's all well and good. But to pretend as though because some Christians get the whole thing so wrong as to believe that their own faith is predicated on argumentational defensibility, and that because those Christians make that mistake, that therefore the atheists should dive headlong into making the same mistake. I mean, it's kind of baffling, frankly. But I was once young. I remember my, juvenile period of interest in the topic of atheism and God. I was probably like 12 or 13 or something. 14 maybe, I don't know. But I got over it pretty quick, right? I think it's fair to say I got over interest in the subject before college. This is a different usage for language. To make a story for your existential life, does your existential life need to be operationalized too? Well, no. Of course not. I don't know what your existential life is as opposed to just your regular life, but we all make a lot of stories about our lives. We tell stories about our lives, either about who we are in ways that don't link directly to specific experiences, or about who we are in ways that do link directly to specific experiences. If you're an INFJ, you're likely to tell stories about yourself through archetypes. INFJs like to understand what INFJs are from some third party because they've got poor subjectivities, right? They've got poor subjective epistemologies. In exchange, they get clarity about what things outside of them are. They get to intuit regarding the identity of things outside of themselves. which is to say, they intuit the value of things holistically, but still objectively. So that's why there are a disproportionate number of INFJs around here, disproportionate to the general population's split of types, because they can tell I'm awesome. Other people can't necessarily tell. You have to have good intuition to see past all of this. Did that ever change about INFJs? I am a possum. You're playing um, the sounds like another word misheard you game. That's also a fun game. I like that one. Is math the best domain for any thought processes? No. Uh, Math is excellent for TI. Your your best TI users are probably end up being pure mathematicians, See, that's the other big reason why intelligence tests, IQ tests, don't meaningfully measure intelligence is if we don't want to be totally mushy about the topic, we'd say that intelligence is a combination of the thinking functions and the intuition functions. So, in that regard, we note that there are three, or there you can have either NI and TI, NI and TE, NE and TE, or NE and TI, right? So there are 4 permutations there. I think each of those permutations is tested more or less successfully by IQ tests. And I think that extroverted intuition is tested less successfully by IQ tests than introverted intuition, introverted thinking, or extroverted thinking. Because extroverted intuition, to incorporate the intelligence that is carried by that function, you have to test for novelty. And testing for novelty is extremely difficult. To try to standardize a test for novelty as a creation function rather than as, say, a receiving function, is almost impossible, because you're at best always going to be looking to see someone demonstrate creativity within a frame, not creativity on the frame level. And creativity within a frame isn't really creative, It's not novel. Because the frame dictates the scope and the scope of the scope of where you can ideate. My father used to operate like a logic gate and was sarcastically inept. Well, I mean, it's easy to talk about the word novelty in terms of new objects on the metaphysical field that deviate from existing objects. You could plot like frequency of a given argument about a given subject, frequency of occurrence of that argument, right? But in order to test that, you'd have to, I mean, well, like one test of novelty is how many different names can you come up with for a made up invention, like I test with in typing sessions, and you kind of have to use your intuition to note exactly how and why they are more or less disparate from one another. You probably could operationalize that in terms of testing, right? Like if I say I've got a new invention, it's a hat that has a bunch of toothpicks stuck into it like a pin cushion, so you always have a toothpick available. What are some different names? Somebody might come up with toothpick hat, hat toothpick, hattie toothpicky, toothpicky hattie. You know, and those are, you come up with a bunch of different variations of that, but it still all be variations of the same concept, right? See that novelty is correlated with how much different the new words, functionally speaking, and how they affect the structural language to have new usage. I mean, I haven't worked out if I were going to try to standardize some kind of test for disparateness among a set of answers, it would have to also be a time factor. It's possible, but it would be complicated to test, right? If you can test it, then you can say you've operationalized your definition of it and link it to that test. And you can justify preferring that test over others with a variety of arguments linking back to how other things in the system are defined. But I will agree that that's why extroverted intuition ultimately is under tested by IQ, is it's extremely hard to test the intelligence that it provides. Because the intelligence that it provides is genuine novelty. One thing I think even my detractors would probably agree with is that on many subjects of interest, I make arguments they've never heard before, even though they've heard lots of arguments about that topic. I make arguments people have never heard before about abortion. I make arguments people have never heard about God. I make arguments people have never heard about a lot of things. And then I make arguments that I'd never heard anybody else make. And then I discover somebody else is also making them too. Like, as per my arguments against evolution, after I began my campaign against that bullshit, somebody pointed me to David Berlinski, who was saying many of the same things I was saying, and some other ones that I was able to learn from him as well. But the point is, if you could plot the frequency of those arguments occurring in the discursive landscape, and increasingly the internet lets us have possible solutions to that, then obviously you can determine the novelty of a given argument. That's just for arguments. There's novelty expressed in more ways than in arguments, but it's most testable in arguments. It's like, I've written a lot of songs, and my best songs are definitely not my most novel. So in music, where you can only evaluate things holistically, you can't deconstruct them and determine anything status-wise is meaningful by deconstructing them. novelty is something that you have to have for something to be interesting. It has to be a new song that nobody's ever heard before, but it has to resonate as to be great. It needs to be like after people have heard it a few times, it's hard for them to imagine a world in which that song didn't exist. And or IQ is a flawed word. It's a flawed word because an IQ test tries to make a composite intelligence that is less informative than any number of possible more precise tests would be, and that purports to measure something it fails to define. Yeah, NI insights are hard to measure. Um, Most people seem to, based on people's responses other than myself, uh, based purely on my experience of a variety of people's responses other than myself, I would say that Cloudy Day in Los Angeles is my most well-received song. And that people think it's really good. People like it a lot. They say, "Wow, did you write that song?" Whatever, shit like that. But if you were to ask people like, "What's my most unique or different song?" They wouldn't say that song. What wears off? Let's see what's going on here. I need to read things. INFJs keep seeking human understanding. Well, I mean, the thing is, also, I would say to a man is not not everything can be collapsed into seeking, right? INFJs understand people in the largest sense. It doesn't necessarily mean they understand every specific person. Like I noted how it was very notable how my Rachel did not understand my dad because he's an ESTJ, and INFJs operate under the assumption that everyone in the world has at least some introverted intuition. Um, but ESTJs, as far as you can tell by engaging with them, have essentially zero. Is it polar SE to be scared of catching a ball being thrown at you at a sports game? Well, it doesn't have to be polar, but it's probably unconscious SE. Would you say that novelty is correlated with how much different? I've already read that. Like maybe the person fears it will jam their fingers or something. I think it's just they're being dragged out of an unconscious function into an instance that demands attention with that function. I would like to make the argument that everyone watching you make this argument. Please hit the like button. Thank you for not arguing back. And if you hit the like button, right. A lot of people make arguments even if they're unique, but it seems people can't often explain their rationale, so it's just like their opinion if you really dig into it. If you really dig into it, they can't explain why they came to that conclusion or why it's accurate. Yeah, well, that's very true. And they also don't want to say it's just my intuition for some reason because they think that invalidates what they're saying. And essentially it does because even if they're right, we shouldn't listen to them. Well, thanks, Boba Fett, for having an opinion on the subject. And Winston's mom as well. Modernity. I understand why you refer to it as such and why you remember it as such. I also have that word stuck out so much to me in that song because of your initial foray into transcribing the lyrics to it, in which you put maternity, which I thought was very funny. I'm pretty done, frankly. In fact, I don't even get any juice out of intellectualism or debate, etc. I guess that personality plays a factor. Some will never get involved. I guess I get juice out of it. I get juice out of this kind of conversation that we're having here, where it's not unnecessarily adversarial. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate everybody chiming in on the subject. Um, Show media says Gregory in disguise is fair. Well, thanks, man. I I honestly wasn't trying to fish for compliments there when I used that analogy. I was just saying, just trying to demonstrate how my best work is in music is not my most extrovertedly intuitive, but my best work in argumentation probably is, you know. Hero Lab says whisper shout. Wow, there's a lot of different opinions here. That is so flattering. This is one of the most pleasant things chats I've ever read. Um, Intuition for me, often getting hunches about things most people miss, like a bigger argument around an issue that most miss because they're in the details. Yeah, well, that's what NI is good at, is big picturing and noting when others are lost too much in the trees and forgetting about the forest. You know, is TI correlated with how articulate you would be? I mean, I think TI is correlated with how negationary you are. So um, TI corrects, negates, questions. I mean, first and foremost, TI is a getting function in terms of information flow. So its first and foremost thing it does is ask a question, get clarification, specifically about how you're using a certain term. Um, for people who have extroverted intuition and TI, we tend to think of it like I tend to think of it more as a creative in its creative capacities, like as the thing that checks the thing that I'm making in my head. But even then, it's fundamentally asking questions about and of the thing that I'm saying, right? So, isolated, why don't ISTPs talk very much? Because they're anypolar. Does that mean they do a poor job of asking questions, negating, parsing things? No, absolutely not. You do an excellent job of that. But um, whether or not they're going to be deemed articulate by somebody, well, probably not, because they aren't going to say enough to be deemed either way. That's not my song though, Hero Lamb. That's a cover. The White Boy song is a cover of a Merle Haggard song. Are you of the opinion that the consensus is right, so the song most people agree is best is the best? No, I was just trying to um, define it purely against uh, external data, so that we wouldn't have to get distracted by an argument about how we're defining best. I don't think that that's necessarily the best definition of best. Or I think it's the best definition of best because it asks the least of everybody because it references only specific, objective data that everybody can reference, presumably. Now, granted, we we'd have to do some polling or something to confirm my experience regarding the consensus, but Gen X Xennial, art is only measured in experiences a person who appreciates it and is on its level. So art is design is dependent on individual ability to resonate. In other words, if you don't get the joke, it doesn't matter how funny it is. I think that those are wise words you said there, Conan 3. Art is only measured in the experience of a person who appreciates it and is at its honest level. So art is dependent on individual ability to resonate. Well, yeah, that I think that's wise and well pointed out. I also think that intuition regarding quality links to attributes of the object being intuited about, so that it's incorrect to say that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, that it's reductive to just say what you said. You have to also point out that we can point to a pretty reliable metric in term with music, for example, in terms of longevity. Truly good songs are still played decades later, even hundreds of years later, like Mozart stuff. And stuff that's not very good gets forgotten. Everybody remembers Britney Spears songs, but nobody can sing me a Jessica Simpson song, even though they were both quite big at around the same time. And the reason is because Hit Me Baby One More Time is a great song. And whatever Jessica Simpson's songs were not. So it is the case that we can distinguish between the quality of objects on the external fields and have that determination be more or less correct as proven by passage of time. But it's also the case that, like everything in the world, there are no realities except those manifested by an agent / observer, you know? And I guess mostly what I do with language really is try to establish with words as clearly as possible that, like, when we're talking about objects on the external metaphysical field, because we have to intuit them holistically, they're irreducibly, they either validate or don't, but in irreducible ways, non-replicable ways, etc. I don't know where I was going with that. Just kind of wandered off ideationally there into the woods to look at some moss. Would I say the truth of cognitive functions is an a priori truth? No, I would not say that at all. I would say that, like, cognitive functions comes before, like, the notion of a priori truth, those kind of status distinctions, they're explained by cognitive functions, not the other way around. Like, a priori truth is just a word people use to mean axiom I don't have to justify. And it's an attempt to make what's ultimately an appeal to, you might call it intuitive consensus, things like that which appalls the conscience. Behavior that appalls the conscience, namely torturing people, etc. The only reason we can say it's wicked, always wrong, etc., is because of an appeal to intuition. The fact that we all sort of intuitively know from if we have to experience some horrors being perpetrated by some people on some others, we'll be deeply traumatized just by observing it. So, sort of on an experiential level, almost everybody, if they test the thing, they'll land squarely on the side of that appalls the conscience. If they have any intuition on the matter, they'll land squarely on the side of that appalls the conscience. It's pointless, silly, and not very intellectually honest to try to say that appeal to intuitive consensus can be justified in a deconstructive fashion, because is what we holistically know, intuitively know, and ergo, that's why we know it. You could experientially know it. I probably don't have to torture you personally to get you to ultimately agree that torture is always wrong. But if you're really removed from even like imagineering yourself into the role of either torturer or tortured, then it's possible that you won't be fully convinced until it's done to you. There was this radio host who was back in the day saying waterboarding wasn't torture, and then actually had it done to him, and he immediately went 180 degrees. That's absolutely torture. We should not be doing that to anybody, because he experienced it himself, right? That's somebody who doesn't have very good intuition about the fact that you don't have to know a lot of specifics about what's being done to know if something qualifies as torture. It's willfully inflicting physical, mental, emotional pain and discomfort in order to either elicit something or to just be cruel, So we can define torture. We can all agree that torture is wrong, but if you're expecting a set of arguments that doesn't require some axiomatic consensus on an intuitive level about something being true or agreed upon as an observation rather than as a contention. Observations being claims that shouldn't be in dispute by anybody, even whoever's arguing against you, like the sun sets in the west. And the thing is, dissembling essentially is the process of disallowing observation. Saying, no, the sun doesn't necessarily set in the west. You have to prove that before I'm going to agree to that. That's dissembling. It's one kind of dissembling. NIBS. In debate, there's this thing called NIBS, which stands for necessary but insufficient burdens. N, little b, I, B, S, little s. They got the little b now. That's why it's called NIBS. Necessary but. They take out the b for but. Necessary, insufficient burdens. If, as a negation to the app, you're trying to set a bunch of necessary but insufficient burdens before they can access their ground, it sounds like this. Before they can even argue that this is legitimate, they need to argue that legitimacy itself is a concept we should consider in this round. That would be a necessary but insufficient burden. NIBS is a way of dissembling, which is to say, attempting to prevent a question from being answered by discourse. And the purpose of discourse is to answer questions. Every point in dispute that we position as a point in dispute is really a question about which there are conflicting answers. For which. So if you're making an advocacy, the question is, should we do my advocacy? I'm saying yes, you're saying no. If you're opposing, if you're the negation, you know. If we're affirming a resolution, then the question is resolved. The U.S. should, meow, meow, meow. The question is just, should the U.S. meow, meow, meow? All my texts are questions. Well, you know, both FI and TI DOMs get information as a primary approach, but TI DOMs are much more likely to ask questions. And I'm not saying you're a TI DOM. I'm just saying that and then the other thing, Conan, is you say here, yet art is, yes, art is neither purely objective nor subjective. Genuinely good material will always have a significant audience and will last. And the interesting thing is, of course, different media have different shelf lives. So music has the longest shelf life. Something that's like, people will never stop putting certain Mozart songs, or whatever you want to call them, into movies and assorted other famous classical music songs, because they're so evocative of certain moods and scenes. And people's ability to resonate with those musical themes will never expire. Same with like the Beatles. Yeah, I lost. I primarily hang out on two channels. One is a debate channel, so that means I must study philosophy plus religions plus debate languages and all there. Then there are my own interests. Last, those run to politics, which leads to certain studies of certain historical time periods, and every day I spend an hour or so studying personality type theories. I think she's talking about this channel in the first thing, I believe, but she could be talking about another channel. Or actually, she may not think of this as a debate channel. I don't know what she thinks of this as. I wouldn't call it a debate channel, but certainly I talk about all those things like philosophy, religion, debate language. Um, Play harmonic minor scale sequences fast enough. Instant Ingve Malmsteen. Tom has 2 channels. Daily, he runs a debate in the morning and evening. Well, good for Tom. Good for Tom. Instead of holding debates, I hold court, which I understand is only interesting to a limited number of people, but you know, I guess it's what I want to do. So that's what I end up doing. Sometimes I'm feeling more enthusiastic about the process than others. This morning I'm feeling pretty good about it. I got my sort of planned, but acceptable, definitely acceptable, extra 15 this morning. So I want 45 milligrams instead of just 30. Which means I get an extra prize. Here was my drink. I left it over here. I got another one up. I'll put it back. I'm looking forward to the other one, of course. Why do I even bother? Why do I get these 12 packs? I know that my favorite Kerns, and by far the best Kern, definitely. I know why I get it. I personally think the guava ones are the best. But Rachel likes one of the other kinds, and I can never remember which one it is. I think it's peach. It might be mango or the other one that comes. So banana strawberry. So I end up getting 2 12 packs, one of peach and mango and one of banana strawberry guava, when really I end up with 1/4 of the amount of guavas that I want. Has anyone heard from Curtis? What happened to him? He made a video not that long ago. Yeah, Last says he's at a stage where he understands more, hence fewer questions. Of course, Last. If you're on some YouTube channel and somebody's saying something that doesn't make sense, I'm quite confident that you'll find yourself asking questions, right? Last. Ethical, intuitive introvert. INFP. But of course, INFPs I wasn't thinking, I didn't look at your name very clearly. I was thinking you were an INTP. INFPs are less questiony because they can get a lot of their questions answered without words. They're still getting information and it's linking to their feelings, but they probably don't need to ask a lot of clarifying questions to make a determination on that. TI DOMs are much more likely to ask more questions because they're looking to have the other party clarify what they mean. And INFPs are likely to do that only in instances when the relevant things to them are unclear rather than the words are unclear. INFPs love feeling bad? I don't think that's true. I'm quite certain that's not true, Boba Fett. Why are you being mean to that INFP? Don't worry about it. INFPs love feeling bad. Masochists should just turn themselves into spies for the free expert torture experience. That would be a fully immersive torture experience. What about ENTPs? Do they clarify or not? Oh, yeah, ENTPs clarify. INTPs and ENTPs both ask clarifying questions so that we can understand what a person means when they say "mya." But INTPs are much more likely to do that kind of as a default to ask the questions, whereas ENTPs are probably a little more likely to get straight to the negation or just be like, okay, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you mean. Meh, meh, meh. ENTPs are much more likely to voice their opinions about the thing themselves, whereas INTPs are more likely to determine whether you know what you're talking about, and then just once they've determined that, they don't need to necessarily say you don't know what you're talking about. ENTPs love being beaten in a debate. I mean, I don't know. I can't really imagine being beaten in a debate. Like, it doesn't work that way, really. If if another individual is like has kind of mastered it, like because you can kind of master the field. There are only there's a finite number of different ways that arguments play out and different kinds of arguments in different kinds of frames. So because of that, even though you can never hear every single contention level argument possible and be prepared for every single thing that anybody might ever say, you can be those things at a level up. So you can always articulate at least uh, argumentation about the kind of arguments they're making and how and why they're whatever. So, um, so the thing is, if I were to get into a debate with somebody who was as cautious as I am about what they're doing, then we'd never find any points of clash, is what would happen. We'd always pivot away from points of clash successfully because we wouldn't be making claims we couldn't substantiate, and our substantiations would link to our frames and our definitions and stuff. And so it would always collapse down to a prefer my framework argument if the frameworks were in disagreement, or and that would be the best level, the best possible opportunity. The most likely thing is we just simply wouldn't find, neither party would be willing to commit to affirm something they couldn't defend adequately. So it's like I'm not interested in winning or losing debates at this point in my life. Um, I'm interested in transcending what passes for debate into some kind of an ecosystem that favors dialectic, real discursive work. But, there aren't a lot of fireworks with that, and people like fireworks. So if I were to have a video, if somehow C.S. Joseph were to say, hey, Eric, Hi, I'm CS Joseph. Can we do a video in which we debate each other about typology? And I said, okay, sure. We had that debate and published that video. On whoever's channel it was published, I'm sure it would do extremely well, right? Like, and it doesn't matter how it went. It wouldn't matter how the conversation went. It would still do very well. Because there's a lot of people who have an opinion about me. A lot of people have an opinion about CS Joseph. A lot of people have an opinion about whose side they're on regarding that question. He says nobody challenges his points, only attacks them, so he's lying. Well, I mean, certainly I've challenged his points. I've made multiple videos deconstructing what he's saying, etc. But he doesn't want to engage with me because no, he says I'm an ESTP. Well, you know, I don't know what to say about him and his goings on. I suspect he's ultimately not the happiest person, but I could just be projecting my my thinking about how I would feel about being that, you know. Maybe he's got exactly what he always dreamed of: a steady income flow and uh, a naive young demographic looking for simple answers to complicated questions. I guess he still positions himself as an ENTP, but anybody who seriously watches both of us would have to acknowledge that one of us isn't, right? That we're not definitely not the same type. And if you honestly look at the two of us and honestly assess and conclude, okay, well they're not the same type, and then go, well, which one's more likely to be the ENTP as I read it in type descriptions, even though that's a poor comparison, but still, as I read in type descriptions. Well, indisputably, I am much more like the type descriptions than he will ever be. I think I suspect he's he's an ENTJ. That kind of helps explain how he I mean, I just don't I think ENFJ or ENTJ, either of those is possible, but I think ENTJ more likely because everything he does is so TE framed. The reason I think he's ENTJ or ENFJ and not ESTJ is I just don't see that the pretty clearly identifiable SI tool. You know, it's pretty easy to see that in action. Um, sure, you can make the argument that he references stuff that he purportedly learned before, but he references it in as a way of not answering people's questions about what he's saying, right? He doesn't actually start with things he's learned. He just starts with kind of, you know, haphazardly distilled down NI mediocrities in a TE frame. But, you know, I have not typed the guy, so I don't know what type he is. I just know that his content about typology is wrong, and that one way we can dismiss him is to say that he doesn't allow his what he's saying to be subject to scrutiny by people. He'll kick you out if you try to scrutinize it, you know? He's a shady person, though. He's actually actively bad. I don't say shit about people, but trust me, he does bad stuff. So he either doesn't know better or doesn't care. I do agree with you. That's my opinion as well, but I can't establish that. I can't meet that the burden of proof that I should meet to really, like make that statement publicly, to make that claim publicly. Like, I hereby assert, meh. I don't feel comfortable doing that, but I understand that it's perfectly okay to feel comfortable doing that in this instance, I think. And I'm just broadly erring on the side of being more responsible with my civil discourse, etc., non-defamatory, whatnot, because I'm a publisher of content. For a short list, he condones bullying sometimes, even though through voice chat on his Discord, they will target one person actively. He's okay with it. And two, he's a guy who believes women should be his servant. Yeah. Well, I have heard a variety of people uh, talk about his, what I would deem exploitative narratives about male female relationships. I think I deem them that because, in my opinion only, I think he's trying to fuck a bunch of bitches. That's what I think. That's just my opinion. I'm not stating that as fact. I have no way of knowing, but well, maybe I will do better off in maybe I'll do better off in this post warning world, and maybe YouTube will recommend me a little bit more than it did when I had a warning. It's hard to say, you even if things do start ticking up in terms of viewership or interest in the channel or whatever, there's no way I'll be able to know for sure if that correlation with the warning dropping off was incidental, coincidental, or causal. No way for me to know. If I was the CEO of YouTube, what would I do? I'd say, look, everybody who works for YouTube, you all need to make sure somehow YouTube promotes talking with famous people more. Because that guy is so right. That's what I'd say. I wouldn't say that would be an especially clever joke. Yeah, I laughed. I think your sensitivity towards others' feelings is allowing you to be a little nicer about that than you should be. Boba Fett's an INFJ. I typed him. Yeah. Yeah, well, it's an equivocation on the word beat. Essentially, AI Last is playing the equivocation game with Boba Fett's statement that ENFP is like getting beat in a debate. So they enjoy physical injury? That's the equivocation game. Well, I'm feeling pretty pretty good, you know? I'm feeling woken up. I'm feeling energized by the joie de vivre that the new day brings. I'm feeling delighted to have 15 people here. It's quite a turnout for a Saturday morning. And I suspect shortly I will go outside and smoke a cigarette. I think I should probably put on a second jacket because it is 31 degrees outside. What would your advice for an INTP to have better boundaries? What would be your advice? To have better boundaries, huh? Um, I guess my advice would be first identify where your existing boundary upkeep falls short and where you can rely on your boundary upkeep. So, in other words, determine exactly where you're susceptible to having problems saying no. Because I guess that's one way of understanding boundary crossing, or ways in which you're susceptible to helplessly having people cross your boundaries in other ways, like um, blow up your phone too much and expect too much response from you, expect too much from you, and then be annoyed when you're not meeting those expectations or something like that, you know. That's very considerate of you, EI last, to reassure Winston's mom that you were not ignoring her. Yeah, how can anybody dislike INFPs? They're so caring. I like to think I'm a very empathetic person too. FI polar doesn't mean that you you aren't caring, empathetic, compassionate, or whatever. I believe myself to be all those things. Certainly, I believe myself to be not not any longer self-reinforcing instances of meanness. I still get mean sometimes when people piss me off, but I don't feel good about it afterwards. And that, my friends, is what they call growth. That's right. I'm a growing boy. And I'm also a not growing baby. Do others see you the same way? Do others see me as being less mean than I used to be? I don't know. I haven't asked them. What do you guys think? I agree, Eric. I think a lot of people who call you evil don't understand your FI polar and how it manifests. I feel like all the times they call you that, they're usually referencing FI polar. Yeah, I laughed. I will admit, I didn't know. I hadn't really thought about the question specifically, but I wasn't operating under the assumption that there was a population of people out there who call me evil. I know there's been a couple toxic spite monkeys in the past who probably would agree with that statement, but um, I like how you leveled up from mean to evil. Yeah. Well, it's true they don't have an operationalized definition of the word evil, but it's also true that the people who call me evil are likely to be, you know, toxic people, basically. Because if you're not toxic and you encounter me, you may dislike me. There are a lot of critiques you could make of me that would be legitimate, but there are some that would can only be attributed um, to that person being toxic. Like if somebody accuses me of being um, fake, like uh, you know, you could accuse, say, Club ENTP of posturing. He's got toupee on. He he lives at his dad's house, but doesn't say that and implies all the time that it's his, etc. Right? So you could accuse him of posturing. It's pretty difficult to accuse me of posturing. Is if somebody's accusing me of being fake or dishonest fundamentally or posturing, then I just assume they're toxic. Same with evil. You might accuse me of being careless with people's feelings. You might accuse me of being mean. And that would, I am sometimes mean. I think it would be unfair to call me overall mean. But if you're calling me evil, then you're definitely toxic because, like, evil is like, I'd have to have at least committed one murder and enjoyed it or something to to qualify as evil, or I don't know. Evil's a strong word to use against me. And it wouldn't bother me because I just think, well, that's just obviously wrong. Can you clarify difference between better correlation and causation with examples? Sure. So, um, I can give you two examples from medicine that work to explain a lot. Uh, right, I'm not saying Club EHP is evil. I'm not even saying he's necessarily toxic. I am saying that here's an example of somebody you could accuse of being phony in some way, and how you couldn't accuse me of that. When I was living in my dad's house, I made no no bones about it. Um, I didn't try to pretend that it was my house or whatever. So, what was I gonna deal with though a second ago before I got distracted? Oh, correlation and causation, right? So, Alzheimer's disease. When they did what's that called? Autopsies. Autopsies on people who died from Alzheimer's disease. They discovered that one big difference between the brains of dead Alzheimer's patients and the brains of dead people who died from other things is that the Alzheimer's patients' brains have more aluminum in them. So when this finding first came out, there was this general explication of the finding as exposure to aluminum causes Alzheimer's disease. But in reality, no matter how strong that correlation is, which is to say it's about 1, which is the strongest correlation can be, it's uniformly the case that Alzheimer's patients, after they're dead, you autopsy them and look at their brains, they've got high levels of aluminum in them. But we can't determine whether from that data whether or not aluminum exposure, getting more aluminum in your system and into your brain somehow causes Alzheimer's disease, or if Alzheimer's disease weakens the blood-brain barrier in some way that allows more aluminum in. In other words, we don't know if it's the result of Alzheimer's disease or the cause of Alzheimer's disease. We just know that there's a very strong correlation, so it's probably one of the two. strong enough correlation that it's probably one of the two. Now, what happens when we afford too much legitimacy to correlations is something that happened with cigarettes. Cigarettes used to say they caused throat cancer because there was a pretty strong correlation between smoking and drinking, especially the combination of the two, and throat cancer. In reality, it's caused by um, and by an STD. So in other words, what drinking and smoking really correlated strongly with was oral sex, was not with um, smoking or drinking. Those are just incidental correlates with oral sex, and the actual causation is a specific STD virus. Would a geek be more NT or NF? I mean, I think NTJs are more geeks. NTPs are more nerds. NFPs are more snowflakes. And NFJs are more cool. They're just cool. Geeks, nerds, snowflakes, and cool people. Cool kids. INFJs are definitely among the cool kids. ENFJs as well. Well, if that's what nerd means, then sure, yeah. ISTPs almost certainly will know everything about their chosen field and very little about other things, you know? So ISTPs, if their chosen field is, say, computer security or something, are likely to be called geeks. If their chosen field is, I don't know, tax law, then they might be called nerds. But if you just were gleaning whether or not they were a nerd from a conversation you're having with them, you're going to conclude they're very quiet, you know? That's what you're going to conclude. You may mistake that for not very bright. Actually, there are extremely intelligent ISTPs out there, but they really struggle with things like interviews. So I remember I had this ISTP student that his mother hired me to train him to interview. I never could make any real progress with him, but I was trying to get him to extrovertly intuit, and I just couldn't do it, It was impossible. So he's going to be dramatically underestimated by whoever interviews him in terms of his intelligence, even though he's very intelligent because he got a perfect score on the, not the SAT, but the other one that's kind of the equivalent thing to that. I forget what it's called. But only like fewer than 1,000 people in the whole country got a perfect score on it or something like that. It's not easy to do. What am I, a nerd or a geek? I'm a baby. It's a little different. I'm a well-spoken baby. I was well-spoken as a baby, even, you know. As I've indicated before, when I was a small child, I was apparently sitting in the family room with my parents. They were watching some war movie or war documentary. And I said to my parents, "This program is not appropriate for little boys." And then I got my toys and I went into my room. I don't remember this, but my parents told my mom retold this story periodically because she thought it was so adorable, you know. And the point is twofold from that. One, that's very verbose for a child speaking before he can even remember what he, the event at all, you know. Um, I couldn't say my R's yet, so it had to be before second grade, probably several years before second grade, you know, kindergarten, preschool, I don't know. It's a strange way for a preschooler to phrase something. This program is not appropriate for little boys. It's also indicative, of course, of FI polar. Instead of telling them this program upsets me, makes me feel bad or whatever, I converted it to FE. Other people would say this program is not appropriate for somebody my age to watch. I think that's strikingly. I think that's very strikingly telling about about how our cognitive functions frame our worldview from very early on, right? Like so much so that even as a child who couldn't possibly so young they couldn't possibly have internalized narratives that could account for this, that even at that young I could not process my own feelings as subjective experiences. I had to attribute them to some externality. It wasn't super easy to raise my ESTP daughter, even though we uh, we have a wonderful relationship, and we did when she was growing up. It wasn't easy to raise her because she didn't necessarily always have the easiest childhood. You know, she she's an action type, and she wasn't necessarily socially graceful as a kid. Like, you're too much. You know, she might have heard that a few times, not from me, but when your child suffers, you suffer. That's what makes all parenting difficult, no matter how wonderful and easy a relationship you have with your child. And mine wasn't perfect as a parent, you know. It's like I was not a perfect parent, but I think Delilah would say I was good enough. Anyway, no matter how wonderful a relationship you have with your child, you suffer when they suffer. I had good parents, but was still a bastard kid. It isn't always representative or causal. It's not always cause or effect, cause and effect or whatever. Well, yeah, sure. The thing is, you're gonna have naturally sort of a configural compatibility with your parents. Uh, my daughter and I had that configural compatibility. We're both FI polar, we're both action types, we're both TI users. Um, so, you know, Delilah and I never had extended conflict. You know, we'd have little fights and then hug and make up and say we're sorry and it was over. And, you know, I was at my worst still a very loving parent. So, I think that people say that. Sometimes people who baby their children end up with asshole kids because the kid grew up like entitled and in a bubble. I think it's easy enough for us to imagine that there's a decent sized population of such people, but I just I think that it's I can think of a girl I knew one time who was my friend's eh, girlfriend named Hetty. She was like Middle Eastern or something. Her name was Hedi. She would, in my opinion, kind of qualifies as somebody who grew up so entitled and in a bubble that she didn't seem to have any understanding of like she was just like this comically rendered example of dumb privilege. But I think that those such people represent a stark minority in the world, because life's just it's pretty rare to not get bruised and beat up a bit by life. Hedi, Hedi. Another one of that same guy's his previous girlfriends was named Sora, and she was also like that, but super dumb. So it was more endearing. She was more like there wasn't a homeless problem back in that time, but she would be the kind of girl who would be like, I don't understand why these people want to sleep in these tents on the sidewalk all the time. Why don't they just go back to their houses? She's the kind of girl who would say shit like that. She was so dumb, Sora. It's funny you mentioned girlfriend in a coma because when I was driving to Delilah's the other day when we went to LA, driving to her pad from the hotel, and I got off freeway and was on mountain heading into Dwardy. The guy in the car next to me was listening to that song, was blasting it. Not like super blasting it, but like blasting it for himself. And so I could easily hear it. I thought, well, that's something you hear every day. Person driving near you blasting girlfriend in a coma. I guess it must actually be quite serious. It is a great title for a song / lyric for a song. Girlfriend in a coma. I know. It's serious. What, Morrissey? What were you thinking when you wrote those lyrics? You're obviously a homosexual, for one thing. I'm gonna have to be in a coma from hypothermia in a second. It's so cold out here. I think Morrissey should have paid more attention to Prince when he informed Morrissey about what it sounds like when the doves cry. Boo, hoo, hoo, hoo. Boo, hoo, hoo, hoo. Boo, hoo, hoo, hoo. Boo, hoo, hoo, hoo. That's what it sounds like when the doves cry. But not what it sounds like when Morrissey cries. When Morrissey cries, it sounds more like he's whining. I was looking for a job and then I found a job. And heaven knows I'm miserable now in my life. Why do I waste valuable time on people who don't care if I live or I die? Those are fucking ridiculously hilarious, awesome lyrics. Talk about an INFP. Maybe an ENFP, I don't know. But that guy wrote some seriously INFP lyrics. Now I know how Joan of Arc felt. Oh. Now you know how Joan of Arc felt, huh? Sweetness, sweetness, I was only joking when I said I'd like to smash you and him in the head. Yeah, he's got ridiculous lyrics. They're awesome. The Smiths is a good name for a band, I think. Those are the sad songs you're looking for. You know what I think? I've had this conversation before, and I like to make lists like this of saddest songs ever. And the top two saddest songs ever on my list, perhaps, are first of all, the number one saddest song. I challenge anyone. Then they should have spelled it differently, Winston's mom. I challenge anyone to come up with a sadder song than this. When Somebody Loved Me in Toy Story 2. When somebody loved me, everything was beautiful. Na, 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 na. That is such a sad song. With the movie part, too. It's just, here come the waterworks, you know. Another very sad song is Say Something, I'm Giving Up on You. I think it was by maybe Christina Aguilera and the guy from Fun. It was by somebody like Christina Aguilera and the guy from Fun. But that's a very sad song. If you're going through a breakup or about to go through a breakup, it's like incredibly sad. Say something, I'm giving up on you. Just right there, that's all you really need to know about sadness. It'll just be sad songs, sad sounds from anime OSTs in Naruto. What are OSTs? Yes, you definitely Google that. Alien 60 double D cups minus bra. See what you come up with. Um, Other very sad songs, like "Crazy" is a really sad song, but it doesn't. It's melodically not sad. It's just lyrically sad. "Crazy" by Patsy Cline. Uh, let's see. How long have I been streaming for? 2 hours and 47 minutes. I think I'm going to get my guitar. I'm going to play a couple of songs and wrap it up around 3 hours. So let's go get my guitar. I put it in the other room. Because I'm trying to shift all my music stuff into here. And I need to get another laptop. The spider on the wall. I was like, what's that thing? But it was a spider on the wall. All right. Let's bring up the old Google Dockaroo that I'm looking for, called Set List Bobette List. Meow. I'm going to start at the bottom of Set List Bobette List with 100,000 million years ago. All right. Let's give it a whirly twirl, as they say. It was 100,000 million years ago. Time ran slow. Nobody yet to show. Place the slabs below. Let them go. They will start to grow. More years ensue and tears gnashing through. Holy slabs come into view. Unchangingly true. Eternally new. Now in the slope appears in charge today. Options at large show other ways. Take a chance now, just wants to check, but don't get caught standing on deck. The slope presents a fork, it's not easy stopping short. Too far along to turn around. Perhaps the better course was headed ever north. Now there's a fitter force. Enemy ground, enemy ground. Was 100,000 million years ago. Time ran slow. Nobody yet to show. Place the slabs below and let them go. They will start to grow. More years ensue and tears gnashing through. Holy slabs come into view. Unchangingly true, eternally new. When the slope appears in charge today. Options at large show other ways. take a chance now. Once quick to check, but don't get caught standing on deck. The slope presents a fork. It's not easy stopping short. Too far along to turn around. Perhaps a better course was headed ever north. Now there's a fitter force. Enemy ground, enemy ground. That's a good song. I like it. Plays nice. I guess we'll go backwards up the old set list, Bobette list. Wonderful, wonderful kitty, having wonderful times. Always cleaning yourself, making sure you got clean lines. Wonderful, wonderful kitty, such a fabulous old friend. And now it's wonderful kitty petting time again. Just let me pet you, don't walk away. It's petting time. And wonderful, wonderful kitty, having wonderful times. Always cleaning yourself, making sure you got clean lines. But your wonderful kitty is a fabulousness I've never encountered before. And I know that I want to pet my kitty some more. Just let me pet you, don't walk away. It's petting time, hooray! Oh, well, he's Pucker Tart Lemon Squeeze, the friendliest guy that you will see. Yes, he wants to be your friend, but he comes from around the bend, and it will be a while till he sees you again. He's Pucker Tart Lemon Squeeze, he's a friend to you and me. He's international delight, favorite go-to right-hand guy. He's international like him and also busy like his friend the beaver bee. Busiest creature, busy as a bee, busy as a beaver, and so much busier than Pucker Tart Lemon Squeeze. Well, he's Pucker Tart Lemon Squeeze, shabba-doo-ba-da-ba-ba-doo-da. Pucker Tart Lemon Squeeze, shabba-doo-da-day. Yes, he's Pucker Tart Lemon Squeeze, shabba-doo-ba-da-ba-ba-doo-da. Pucker Tart Lemon Squeeze, shabba-doo-ba-day. And if you go to visit him for starts, remember to bring something sour or tart. He's not a fan of sugary treats because he's Pucker Tart and not Pucker Sweet. Well, he's Pucker Tart Lemon Squeeze, the friendliest guy that you will see. Yes, he wants to be your friend, but he comes from around the bend, and it will be a while till he sees you again. Pucker Tart. That was Pucker Tart Lemon Squeeze, a song about the guy who's got a half a lemon for a head. Meow. No good comes from skating on with them whom you've mistaken for the one. Habituated defense and indecency self-inflicts eventually once your search is done. Driving in the car last night, we had a massive fight. Each insisting we were right and the other one to blame. So when you pulled that stunt, I screamed something awfully blunt. My words were as wrong as they were dumb, and I've earned my share of shame. It's each of our own failings, not us doing the nailing to the wall. We'd fierce of the others sailing off to reset their life and all. You can trust me and I can trust you, though neither trust ourselves much true. The love lies deep between you and me, at least about that we should both agree. Driving in the car last night, we had a massive fight. Each insisting we were right and the other one to blame. So when you pulled that stunt, I screamed, you're a worthless cunt. My words is wrong as they were dumb, and I've earned my share of shame. My share of shame. It's a good song. Kind of surprises you at the end when you realize that I really did say something very blunt. You're living on a time frame I will never know. Alienation and humanity's soul. Imagine you a future after the collapse, returning to the urgency of isolated past. Picturing community free of metaphysics, haunting buffalo while you're picking red delicious. Knowledge of the seasons, wisdoms of old. Fires blazing in the night to keep away the cold. Hostility is kept at bay by what you think is in the way of life as children of the land, with an agave weatherman. Imagining a history that never could have been. You lecture at the college, advancement is a sin. Lamenting disconnection in every corporate act. Asserting all your feelings and ignoring all the facts. Hostility is kept at bay by what you think is in the way of life as children of the land, with an agave weatherman. You find modernity just so banal. Wish you had been born in time, but now, and your experience won't run afoul of exceptions you might allow. You visualize nobility sipping on some port, or tribes of peaceful savages in beautiful comport. But few of history's people ever vastly did cavort, 'cause life was solitary, nasty, brutish, poor, and short. Hostility is kept at bay. Hostility is kept at bay by what you think is in the way. What you think is in the way of life as children of the land, with an agave weatherman. With an agave weatherman. Oh, I'm doing a pretty good job this morning of playing these songs. Amelia always gives me trouble, but I'll give it a shot anyway. Amelia, go from that place. Take unto you the details of your case. Amelia, when you rise up above, floating ahead and soaring like a dove. What will they say when they look at you, then moving sideways in the space you're in? Sidelong with your thirsty grin. Amelia, can't you see? You and I will never be. Amelia, yet you're still free. With too much opportunity to leave out in the rain. Amelia, Amelia, we're watching you. Fell for sure. No matter what we do. Amelia, when you rise up above, floating ahead and soaring like a dove, what will they say when they look at you, then moving sideways in the space you're in? Sidelong with your thirsty grin. Amelia, can't you see that you and I will never be? Amelia, yet you're still free. With too much opportunity to leave out in the, too much opportunity to leave out in the, too much opportunity to leave out in the rain. Amelia. Well, it wasn't disastrously bad. Let's do satchel now. Meow. Every life lived reaches a time when the road splits in two. There are times, dark times, times of despair, times when it's hard to feel good. That's when I look for my sack full of solvency and that satchel of helpful goods. Satchel of helpful goods. Satchel of helpful goods. Satchel of helpful goods. Every life lived reaches a time when the road comes to an end. When I'm there, will there be anybody else around? Or will I travel all alone? That's when I'll look for my sack full of solvency and that satchel. Now nothing but bones. Yeah, that satchel filled up with home. Satchel of helpful goods. 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 was pretty okay. I'll go play this. Gerald has a thought. Gerald has a lot. Gerald has a plot to get to Marjorie's tater tots. He's got a good idea for a name-changing business. Thinking now about what to call Christmas when they hire his firm to change that name. Gerald always thought there'd be chance enough to return to the work left rough. He'd get back to it eventually, but his visions piled up and his plans would interrupt all the work that started off so hopefully. And now his mind is back on his business, thinking of changing factless to listless, so how all the people will shout his name. And Gerald knows he understands ever more clearly now. He won't provide explanation, providing the why or the how. He'll see you and know you from inside your heart. Exciting, delighting, Gerald plays his part. But Gerald still knew there's too much to do, and he had spent time on the interview. Too much to discuss, the where, now, and what. Too much time spent nitpicking the skew with you. Gerald has a thought. Gerald has a lot. Gerald has a plot to get to Marjorie's tasty spots. He's got a good idea for a name-changing business. Thinking now about what to call Christmas when they hire his firm to change that name. Oh, Gerald has a thought. That may be one of the best times I ever played that song. I really killed it on that one. It was the right tempo. That's kind of critical. Okay. And Sammy has a story that need be told, and this is a song for an open road, and such a thing must always do its job. Married up Jeb, turned 19, 4 years in, 3 kids weaned, weary now and questioning the path. Agency outpaced his discretion, locking in our courses, way too young. The urgency comfort is really just depression, making sure those underneath them always run. Doug at 20 thought bourbon fun, like was Doug at 21, and so forth, well up into middle age. Well, once it seemed to set him free, became his whole identity. Now Doug's about another drunken rage. Agency outpaced his discretion, locking in our courses, way too young. The urgency comfort is really just depression. Offer you incentives, but they haven't got a thing that's fun. Everybody's panicked about the kids. Lock 'em up with extra dexedrine. Mathematics to produce success, or impose more on just the rest. Agency outpaced his discretion, locking in our courses, way too young. The urgency comfort is really just depression, making sure those underneath them always run too fast. Without consent, it's really just depression by parasites surviving on their wages earned by lying, while they feed their fear of dying. Yes, let's feed upon the futures of the young. One more song. One more. It's too fast. Boba Fett. I played it too fast, but thank you for your wholehearted and brutal dismissal. Much appreciated. At least you're not pulling your punches. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm going to end with Cloud today. It's comfortable for me to play. I like it. It's a good closing song. Well, I'm still playing one more song, Trouble. I'm assuming you're saying encore. It's a very cloudy day in Los Angeles. And today we run out of time. Struggles past, troubles still to come. The day is nearly done. Will someone buy us some more time? Cloudy day in Los Angeles. Cloudy day in LA. I'm no sort of evangelist, but I have something to say. Life can strangely be forgiving to those who stay awake all night. And mostly voices say to give in. They'll try to sap your will to fight. But whether I'm supposed to be here or just be soon forgotten, noise is sort of based on what I see here and also on what I avoid. It's a very cloudy day in Los Angeles. And today we run out of time. Struggles past, troubles still to come. The day is nearly done. Will someone buy us some more time? Cloudy day in Los Angeles. Cloudy day in LA. I'm no sort of evangelist, but I have something to say. Something to say. I'm not in a particularly good voice right now. I feel comfortable playing the guitar, but my voice is kind of iffy, you know, a little cracky, a little like my breath control not great at the moment. Stuff like that, you know. Here, let me do you this. So, there you go. Now I've pushed all the food back onto your plate. Because you're such a tidy eater, yes. You're Captain Tidy Eats. Okay, but I'm not going to watch you. I'm Just kind of done with the whole watching you eat thing. Okay, let's put the guitar back. And really, the moral of this story is, no, I don't need to have the guitar in the living room. I can just have it in here, and when I want to play it, I can come in here and get it and play it. If I want to record music, I'll have all my recording stuff set up in here and all the music stuff set up in here. And that'll be fine. I just need to do the actual labor now of setting things where I want them to go, plugging them in, so forth, etc. I mean, the crazy thing is, like, yesterday, both Rachel and I encountered the same phenomenon. It's not even that he wants us to watch him eat. He wants us to have a shared activity of going into the kitchen together. Sometimes he doesn't even get up on the table. He just stands there and looks at us. Thanks, Ruben. I think Gerald also was the best rendering of today's set. Although I was also pretty pleased with no good comes from skating on with those whom you've mistaken for the one. Driving in the car last night, we had a nasty fight, each insisting we were right and the other one to blame. So when you pulled that stunt, I screamed, "You're a worthless cunt." My words is wrong, as they were dumb, and I've earned my share of shame. That's a well-written song. It's a little bit of a tiring song to play because you don't really have a lot of breaks in it or whatever. Share of shame, or SOS, as it's shorthanded. I shorthand it to SOS if I write it on a set list or something. Thanks, Lou. The cat is not eating to be. I'm very convinced that the cat is an ENFJ. And as such, he really wants to check in with me and Rachel, make sure that we're still cool all the time, you know. Most cats are. This cat is definitely not SI high. He barely cleans himself at all. And high SI people or cats don't need an audience to eat food. They eat when they're hungry, because they're hungry, until they're full. Like Capillo does. She's an ISTJ cat. She knows how to eat just fine. She doesn't need any assistance with it. That Sheriff Shame song is proof positive that sometimes the inspiration comes from strong emotions, you know. Like I came back from this huge fight that Kimberly had and just like immediately started writing that song because I don't know, it was like this feelings driven compulsion to express something about it. And the lyrics are really schizophrenic. The first part of the song is basically telling myself, without having much conscious awareness that's what I was saying, that there's no good in continuing on with this woman who you've mistaken for the one but clearly isn't. But then, you know, I like make the lyrics basically say, but that's not us. We love each other, which was insane, you know? And that's not the only song where, like, that truth came out that we should break up. I also wrote during that period of time, what's the big problem? And I said in it, I think I did. They're saying that thing, yeah, you guys both have lots invested. That's not a reason to stay around. Through the years, you've both been tested. Time to move on. Time to move up, find higher ground. Well, that was clearly about my own relationship, but I didn't interpret it as such. That's called, I guess that's the appropriate use of the word subconscious. It's like I was conscious of what the words meant, but unconscious of how they spoke about me rather than the world. I need a full cigarette because I don't want any of those butts. I don't like this ashtray. I mean, I like it better than no ashtray, which was the alternative that it replaced. But I really prefer ashtrays that are a bottle. A bottle makes the best ashtray. If you don't want it, if you want to save the butt, you have to put it beside the bottle. But at least with a bottle, you just throw the ashtray away when it gets filled up and then replace it with another bottle. You don't have to worry about things catching other cigarette butts on fire inside the bottle because the bottleneck chokes off the oxygen. And in this instance, I'm using the word bottleneck literally. It's rarely used literally, but in this instance, I'm using it literally in a way that reveals clearly why it's used figuratively to mean what it means. Well, there's one squirrel out getting cutlets from the rocks over there. There may have been other squirrels on the wall that were scared away when I came outside. I'm not sure. But it's good to see that at least one squirrel is taking advantage of the cutlets. There he is. Squirrel cutlet lover Joe. If loving cutlets is wrong, he doesn't want to be right. If I were a little bit more pragmatic, I'd probably just put cutlets over there on the rocks because the animals, the birds and the squirrels and such, make a big mess with the cutlets that I put on top of the wall so that I have cutlet seeds all over the driveway. I could avoid this problem entirely by just putting cutlets over there on the rocks. But I don't know. I like the squirrels to be at eye height. And that wall is just about eye height for me, from here anyway. It's a fairly tall wall. Like I bet Rachel comes up to like here or something. I don't know. I should have her stand up against that wall and see where she comes up to because she's only 5'2". And I'm almost 6'5". At 6'5", I was this close to being a professional basketball player. All I needed was dribbling skills, shooting skills, defending skills, and even better rebounding skills, and be about 6 inches taller. And I would have been a professional basketball player. This close. Instead, I was a sub-mid pickup player. I actually defended quite well. I should give myself a bit of a correction there. I wasn't a bad defender. I was a good rebounder. You know, because on pickup courts, I'm probably the tallest guy there, or one of the tallest guys. And I'm skinny, so I was always able to, like, people had trouble boxing me out. I can kind of snake around them. But, you know, I was maybe 50% on layups, maybe 10% on jump shots. And I practiced too. I never got any better at it, really. But the truth is, mostly instead of practicing, I just played pickup games. If I'd get there, maybe if there's nobody there, I'd shoot around for a little bit. But I didn't like the way a basketball made my hands feel when you play on outside courts. It makes it feel all dusty and grimy, which I didn't really notice when I was in a game and, you know, competition was ongoing. But I did notice when I was just shooting around by myself. Also, since I missed so many shots, I was always having to chase my balls. The other sport that I liked to play when I was younger was Frisbee football, sometimes called ultimate Frisbee. Frisbee football is a game that I'm pretty good at. And unfortunately, it was a game that I played with my peers on this big field in Sierra Madre when I had a larger group of friends, you know, and we were young and liked to hang out and do things. I never even encountered like a possible ultimate Frisbee team that I could join even intramurally until college, at which point, I don't know, I was depressed or something. I was at college after all. Talk about vestigality. College is so deprecated. Hooray, everybody! I made more poo. It still smells like hot death. But that just makes me even more glad to get it out of me, of course, you know. Nobody wants a butt full of hot death. Except for somebody in anime whose jutsu involves shooting hot death out of their butt. That'd be like the grossest jutsu ever. Disable their opponents by shooting projectile diarrhea at them. They'd be like, oh, gross! While they're all grossed out, you can chop them with your sword or whatever. basically induce vomiting in your opponent and then strike them down while they puke. Strike them down is an interesting expression, huh? It seems like it's missing some implied parts of an adverbial clause there, like strike them so that they fall down. It's what we call an elliptical adverb clause. Do you remember the hilarious scene when I think it's Naruto has to carry somebody on his back to the Leaf Village, and Rock Lee says to either Neji or Shikamaru, he's like, "Hey, you get on my back now," and Neji or Shikamaru is like, "Hell no." It made me laugh a lot. It made me laugh enough that I remember it. And even though I haven't, A Butt Full of Hot Death is a good name for a live album. Not bad. Yeah, it is plausible in anime. So, Naruto Shippuden was my first real anime passion, and I Death Butt sequel to Death Note. It's exactly the same story, except instead of seeing ahead of everybody about everything, he just has hot death in his butt. I guess the other sport that I liked as a kid and still in theory like, although I haven't gone in a long time, is skiing. I don't know if you call that a sport or it's like it's sort of a sport. It's more like a physical activity, unless you're competing in skiing, which I never competed in it. It's like fishing. Is fishing really a sport? I don't find it to be a sport. I find it to be a pleasant activity you do with your hands or something. Just like I don't find putting a puzzle together to be a sport. I think to qualify as a sport, things need to be competitive. You can make stuff that's normally done non-competitively competitive. You often have to force it, like ice skating, right? They make it competitive by having judges, but it's not really inherently a competitive sport. Debate's much more of a natural sport, for example, than ice skating, even though debate doesn't have any physicality to it. It's like the 100-meter dash is a sport. Jogging is an activity, or a workout, maybe. You call it a workout, I guess. Oh yeah, I always release fish when I go fishing. My approach is catch and release. I'm not looking to catch fish to eat them. Unfortunately, um, sometimes a fish will swallow the hook, at which point you can't get it out of them without killing them. So, fortunately, I don't catch very many fish. I almost never catch fish. I go fishing, but I never catch fish. And I don't really want to catch fish. I just want to go fishing. Fishing benefits from the accompaniment of a few blunts, yeah. What I really want to do when I go fishing is catch a fish, take a picture of it, successfully release it, and then I'll be perfectly satisfied. And if I don't catch a fish, I don't care at all. Because, like Ruben indicates, fishing is for sitting by some water, smoking joints, and fiddling with your fishing pole. That's what it's for. When the fish swallows the hook, they're setting themselves up for a butt full of hot death. Well, they're setting themselves up for decapitation if they swallow my hook, because I'm like, okay, I'm not going to make this thing suffer anymore. So it's not going to survive me removing the hook from its belly. And, it's like, I can only even tolerate catching like fish that you normally catch, like trout. Rachel and I started going fishing at this lake in Los Angeles, and I kept catching turtles, and I just had to stop going because it hurt my heart too much. I don't need to get the hook back necessarily, but I'm not on Naked and Afraid. If you're on Naked and Afraid, I don't fish anywhere where I can catch salmon. I just fish places where I can catch trout. And, like I said, I probably will go fishing again relatively soon. There's people who go hunting and fishing but have no idea how to skin or clean a fish or animal. That always seems like something a fourth person would do. Well, sure, like Rachel's like that. I do know how to scale and clean a fish, butterfly it, cook it, whatever, because I was raised in a family that did that. But it's like if I take Rachel fishing with me, it's because I want us to share that activity, not because, you know, and I don't think that Rachel should have to know how to clean a fish, set up a rig or whatever to go fishing with me. Countdown to extinction. Well, Boba Fett, assuming that humanity does eventually go extinct, we've always been on a countdown to extinction. Nothing's changed. I guess we're closer to it than we were before, but that's necessarily going to be the case if we're measuring distance and time and the event is in the future. And whether, in fact, extinction is an eventuality for humanity, I think is not is a question still in the answers to which are still in dispute. Humanity has the capacity to survive quite an inhospitable environment, thus has the ability to survive even rather dramatic climate change. And that seems to be the thing that everybody points to as the likely cause of human extinction. I think climate change is very unlikely to cause human extinction. But, we've also got to worry about giant asteroids hitting the planet or something like that. That seems more likely to be responsible for human extinction than anything else. At least prior to the sun going away. When the sun goes away, we'll have to have moved to a different planet or else we'll be in trouble. What do you mean I don't pay my bills? Why do you think I'm broke? What do you mean I'm not kind? Just not your kind. It'll take us with it? What'll take us with it? The sun? I mean, not if we're not in this solar system anymore. Will we ever be able to move to a different solar system? I'm not sure about that. I understand that people have generated a number of different speculative notions that could empower people to, or some species, to travel beyond the speed of light. But those speculative notions, as far as I'm concerned, are just speculative ways around a hard limit set by Einsteinian physics. And there's no reason to think that any of those possible solutions can actually be realized. Just as I believe that there will never be sentient artificial intelligence, sentient self-aware artificial intelligence, I also don't believe that we'll ever break the light speed barrier. But we don't necessarily have to break the light speed barrier to move to another solar system. If we could make some sort of advancement in like suspended animation kind of thing, and then you could move people while it takes longer than a human lifetime. Or if you can construct a big enough ship, you could have a couple of generations who just live entirely on the ship before it arrives at its destination and then offload. You'd have to somehow manage gravity so that the people on the ship can live in Earth-like conditions, and you'd have to have an Earth-like destination. Well, people have speculated about wormholes, but and they've speculated how, in theory, the existing Einsteinian model doesn't preclude this from occurring. But that doesn't mean that it does occur. And as you point out here, Bofet, we've never identified one. Additionally, similar to time travel, faster than light travel, accepting a situation where humans are the only sentient life in the universe, assuming there is somewhere else in the universe some kind of sentient life, then the status quo seems to falsify faster than light travel. Because if it's plausible and there are more than just humans in the universe, then it's already been attained by a much more advanced civilization. And if it's already been attained, then why isn't there interplanetary, intergalactic traffic and stuff? In other words, why didn't we long ago encounter and continually encounter various species utilizing faster than light travel to visit other species, which is a natural thing that a sentient being would do? Well, they've successfully replicated fusion, creating a fusion reaction in a lab. So if we extrapolate from that, we could imagine some sort of contained fuel cell involving fusion, nuclear fusion, or in a more primitive explication, we could fuel it with nuclear fission and just dump the radioactive waste out into outer space. Well, they've replicated it 3 times now. So the thing is, when they first announced it, I was skeptical because I remember when they first announced success in cold fusion, and it turned out to be bullshit. But now they've replicated it 3 times. Okay, cool. It's not cold fusion either. So whether or not they're going to be able to turn the ability to ignite a fusion reaction into a power source that produces more energy than it takes in to get it going, there's a lot of ground to travel between igniting a fusion reaction and making it a viable fuel source or energy source. Would you say it's an intuitive thing to spend all your day in some internet chat room, like all day every day? I think it's indicative of a configural preference slash compatibility with the external metaphysical field instead of the external physical field. So it's consistent with SE unconscious. Probably more consistent with SE7, 8, and maybe to some extent, maybe with ISFJ's 5, but it's mostly going to be any 1-2 people who are guilty of that, or INFJs because they got fourth slot SE. I mean, regardless, it's like because the internet provides people content that hits a variety of values, right? Like I could go on YouTube and watch nothing but videos of bugs fighting each other. That's a category of video that you can watch. It's like YouTube said it's okay to show videos of bugs fighting each other. We won't allow you to show animals fighting each other or people fighting each other, maybe even, but we will allow you to show bugs fighting each other. So, it's like if I'm watching a lot of those videos and hanging out in that community, then that's indicative of some kind of relationship with content and meaning, it's not especially meaning based. There was a channel I watched a couple videos of briefly. It's a guy who gets old army rations as old as World War II that haven't been opened yet, or even older than that haven't been opened yet, and then opens them and eats them. So, and like the World War II ones, they come with cigarettes. So he'll try one of the cigarettes. Well, I'm not sure which kind of people are most likely to hang out in Discord. Yeah. It's one of those things where people are just much less likely to go do their hanging out in a physical spot than they used to be. Um, you know, maybe if you're just looking to hook up or something, you're probably better suited to pursue your goals online in a variety of community spaces than you are at a bar or something. So you might have to travel further to get your action. But a lot of people on Talking with Famous People have ended up hooking up with themselves. Sometimes with each other. Sometimes they're far away from each other. They're rarely close to each other. But that's more consistent with people who are looking to be in a relationship than people who are looking to play the field, I guess. Junk stuck in disk tray. You know that slide out thing from your computer that you're supposed to put your penis in? I can't seem to get it right. It keeps hurting my penis a lot, and I can't get it to go all the way in. That's actually for DVRs. I mean DVDs. Really? It's not for my penis? No. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up. It's 9:30, and Lou says I spend a lot more time passively listening than interacting. It's pretty much the only chat I participate in. Well, this is a very uh, interfacey live stream, right? I engage with what the chat's saying a fair amount. Sometimes I'll go off on, and Eric has a lot of opinions about this, and I'm not reading anything until I'm done with all of my opinions. But by and large, I like the chat a lot because it launches the next thing, you know? It's like when there's more going on in the chat, I tend to stream longer and find it more effortless and pleasant because I have things to respond to. Sticks Hexenhammer, one of the only thoughtful political people on YouTube, but he doesn't only do politics. That's probably why. Yeah, well, if you're only doing politics, you're either going to have to appeal to the to the core audience of political programming, which is typically partisans looking for confirmation, or you're going to have to do upper level political discourse, in which case you're going to get mostly pushback from people who don't like the fact that you're not being all like, you either hate corporations or you're the enemy, you know, or whatever. So anyway, I will talk to you all later. Don't doubt, I suspect I will likely stream again later. But I'm going to put in some time on some cartoons and some football now, which I think is an important part of a balanced diet. So until later, adieu.